Chapter 20. A fine drizzle fell on the streets of old Detroit. The street lamps reflecting off the shiny macadam made the area seem almost clean and bright. Robo sat silently in the turbo cruiser. He stared at the pimps, the hookers, and the drug dealers slithering through the Tenderloin district. He hadn't checked into the precinct all day. He figured, at this point, he didn't have to. If Roosevelt and Tyler were going to rein him in, they would have already attempted to do it by now. He was their special project, wasn't he? He rationalized that to try to yank him in off the streets would be a bad public relations move. A good idea gone bad at OCP. He raised his steel hand and made a fist. The input strip on his knuckles popped out. He inserted the strip into the cruiser's portable crime computer access port and concentrated. He fed the computer the names of Leon Klingensmith, Joe Nelson, Chan Oland, and Clarence Bodiker. The computer whirred and produced several printouts of their rap sheets, as well as 3 new 8x10 photos. Robo took the photos and hit the streets. He collared a few pimps and hookers, showing them the photos. Always, the answer was the same. "I ain't seen them, man." "No way." They're complete strangers to yours truly." Robo walked down the street, an angry, half-charred Titan. Walking by an alleyway, he spotted a teenage gang stripping a car. He knew it was a stolen vehicle. It didn't much bother him. He pulled his gun from its holster and pointed it at the punks. "Freeze!" he commanded, his voice booming through the alley. The kids spun and recognized Robo right away. "Let's split!" one pimply-faced kid said. "Are you kidding?" the other replied. "That's the Robocop! He'll split you in two!" "Damn!" the first one replied as Robo marched into the alley. He stared at the gang members hard. They dropped the auto parts. "Up against the wall. Hands above your head. Legs spread." The kids did as they were told. Robo surveyed the car. "I assume this isn't part of an auto shop homework," he commented. The kids shook their heads, no. "Fine," Robo said. "I think we understand each other. I'm not here to bust you for trafficking in stolen goods. I'm here for some information. Have any of you seen these guys?" He walked by each of the frightened gang members, flashing the 3 8x10s. The first 9 gang members blurted, "No, sir," even before their eyes could make contact with the photos. The 10th member, however, hesitated before shaking his head back and forth. Robo placed a powerful knee against the boy's spine. The boy slid to the ground. "I ain't seen any of them, really." Robo noticed that the boy's eyes had seemed to linger on the photo of Chan. "You haven't, eh?" he asked. He flashed the photo of Chan again. "You're positive?" "Yeah, I'm pretty positive, all right. They're all strangers." Robo picked the boy up by his collar and held him high above his head. The boy wriggled helplessly in the steel hand. "Let me go, man! You're depriving me of my rights!" Robo slammed the boy against the wall and held him fast. "I can deprive you of a lot more," he shrugged. "I don't know the dude!" "Now, why don't I believe you?" Robo said. "You'll notice that my hands are made of steel." He carried the boy above his head to the derelict car. Placing the 3 photos on the car's hood, he took his free hand and slammed it into the hood of the car. His fist pierced the car's metal frame as if it were made of cardboard. He then carried the boy back to the wall and once again pinned him against the brick surface. "Imagine what a hand like this can do to someone's neck," he whispered. The boy shook his head. Oh yeah, I remember that dude. His name is Chan Oland." Robo smiled. "You wouldn't know where I could find him, would you?" Not only did the boy remember where Chan was located, but he proved positively scholarly on every nefarious hobby Chan was into at the moment, including cop killing. Robo thanked the boy, grabbed the photos, and headed back towards the turbo cruiser. Before leaving the alleyway, he turned to the frightened gang members. "Don't worry," he reassured them. "This is our little secret." Chan Oland sat smoking a joint in the rock shop. He was posted as guard, but he knew there'd be no trouble. None of the cops in the neighborhood knew about the place, and the locals were too scared to tip them off. The joint used to be a supermarket. Now it was the biggest drug processing lab in the city. The floor-to-ceiling windows had been painted out, and an ingeniously crafted pharmaceutical assembly line now stretched across the area where, once, dozens of market aisles had been. A half-dozen workers, wearing protective masks, worked under the piss-yellow fluorescent lights, grinding, sifting, and bottling cocaine. Chan glanced outside the front entranceway. The street was empty. He nodded at the shotgun-toting guards marching on the catwalks high above them. His nod was the all-clear sign. No problem. He inhaled deeply, getting a noseful of the loose coke dust. Clarence Boddicker walked by with Sal Lucioni, the operator of the establishment. Sal was flanked by 2 bodyguards of the Neo-Simeon persuasion. Clarence was trailed by Leon and Joe. Sal and Clarence were in the middle of a disagreement. Chan didn't pay too much attention to the verbal sparring. Sal was a weasel. Clarence could eat him for breakfast if he wanted to. Sal was one of those sleazeballs who dressed the part. Pants too short, white socks, pencil-thin mustache, forehead always sweaty. It was hard to tell when the guy was upset or happy. He blinked a lot. "I don't give a shit what you want to pay, Clarence." Sal was sputtering. "I set the price in this town." Clarence removed his sunglasses and smiled at the sniveling coke baron. "Listen, Salvador. Maybe you haven't heard. I'm the guy in old Detroit. You want space in my marketplace? You're going to have to give me a volume discount." Sal wasn't interested in Clarence's view of economics. "Let me put things in perspective here, Boddicker. You killed a bunch of cops. Fine. Everybody has to let off steam once in a while. Word on the street has it you got big connections downtown. That's fine too. A guy gotta have friends. But here's your big weakness, pal. You got no friends here. In fact, you got a lot of enemies. You make people nervous. A lot of folks would love to see a guy like me put you out of business." Clarence smiled at the weasel, the smile a superior nun flashes at a snotty first-grade student. "I run the sales organization in old Detroit, Salvador. People call me Sal. I call you a dumb wop son of a bitch," Clarence said evenly. "I can keep the streets dry long enough to put you back in the olive oil business." Sal's face turned crimson. He faced one of his King Kong-sized companions. "Frankie!" he screamed. "Blow this cocksucker's head off!" Frankie nodded and drew a .357 Magnum from his pocket. Chan slipped from behind an assembly line, shotgun cocked. He slid the barrel under Sal's chin. Frankie froze. All the workers imitated Frankie, staring at the confrontation in the making. Chan grinned at Frankie. Frankie gawked at Sal. Sal stared wide-eyed at the shotgun pressing against his Adam's apple. Clarence patted Sal gently on the cheek. "Sal, baby, the Tigers are playing tonight and I never miss a game. Do you think we could interface on this? Reach a solution in, let's say, 5 minutes?" Sal gulped. "Sure, Clarence. I think we can get together on a reasonable price." Chan held the shotgun firmly on Sal's neck. His back was to the entranceway. He didn't notice the two massive steel doors flexing inward. With a tremendous clang, the doors burst in, torn from their hinges. The mobsters and their goons spun around as one, as Robo trained his auto-9 on them. "Hello, boys," he said. Chan pivoted, training his shotgun on the intruder. Frankie leveled his Magnum. All the workers in the factory scrambled for their heavy assortment of automatic weaponry, ranging from Uzis to Heckler & Koch HK-92s, guns strong enough to blow the side off a moving auto at 100 yards. On the catwalk, the two guards cocked their guns and aimed downward. Robo didn't flinch. "Come quietly, or there'll be trouble." The mobsters glanced at each other, bewildered. Robo zeroed in on their positions, flipping his body into combat mode. He scanned the interior of the factory. The printout: 15 targets, 9 shots, full, superimposed itself over the scene in Robo's eyes. The thugs regained their composure. Leon was the first to act. He raised his shotgun. "Fuck you, buckethead!" he offered, firing a round at Robo. Leon's shot signaled a release of dozens of rounds. Every fool with a gun opened fire on Robocop. Clarence hit the ground, rolling under a table as the wild firing continued. Robo stood his ground. Bullets and buckshot glanced harmlessly off his armor. He raised a mighty forearm to deflect a .357 shot aimed at his face. All the while, he calmly fired his auto-9 into the crowd, picking off one after another of the Rockhouse workers. Chan bellowed, pumping his shotgun at the cop. Robo tilted his head and smiled. He squeezed the trigger of the auto-9, sending a well-aimed bullet into Chan's forehead. The top of the thug's skull blew away as he tumbled, spewing blood and bits of semi-solid matter into the lap of a screaming Sal. Leon ran for cover. Frankie gritted his teeth and fired his Magnum fiercely. One of Robo's bullets slammed into Frankie's teeth, shattering them and exiting through the back of his head. Sal's other bodyguard took a slug in the arm. Yelping, he dropped his weapon and ran for cover, trotting directly into the path of a volley of bullets fired by the factory workers behind him. Joe, glancing at the body of Chan, grabbed his .45 and fired 6 shots at Robo, holding the gun in two-handed combat style. Robo smirked and sent a bullet slamming into Joe's right hand. Joe screamed as 2 of his fingers blew to pieces. The force of the impact sent his .45 sailing off into space. Leon dove across a conveyor belt filled with bottles of Coke and dragged Joe through a fire door to safety. 2 lab workers, standing next to each other, were hit by a single slug. They fell, mortally wounded, onto a pile of white powder. An alarm bell clanged to life. Sal's henchmen began to scatter. Robo stood his ground. He flipped his vision into targeting mode. The printout appeared in his brain. Targets: 10, 9, 8. 2 shots remaining. Reload. He fired the remaining 2 bullets. Targets: 7, 6. No shots remaining. Robo decided that it was time to enter the factory in earnest. He marched into the maelstrom of sizzling lead and cocaine dust. Sal attempted to run by him. Robo extended a mighty left hand and caught the drug kingpin by the neck. Reaching back like an Olympian athlete, Robo hurled the screaming man, javelin style. Sal sailed head first into 4 of his firing henchmen. Robo calmly ejected the spent magazine from his gun and reloaded. The remaining lab workers hunkered down behind a counter filled with bottles of Coke. They opened fire once more on Robo. Robo returned to combat mode. 7 shots remaining. He calmly picked off 2 of the lab workers. He then noticed plumes of cocaine exploding around his feet. He directed his gaze upward. 2 guards on the catwalk were firing their shotguns at him. Robo stared at the men high above him and tilted his head. Vectors appeared before them in Robo's vision, suggesting the best possible angles of fire. Robo fired once, spun around, and fired a second time. A guard fell to his death, landing 2 feet before Robo, a bright red splotch on his chest. The second guard, bleeding from the eye, began to tumble down off the catwalk. His foot, however, slammed into a loose plank, wedging itself tightly. The guard, dying slowly, found himself dangling by 1 foot high above the factory. Robo watched him spin. He sensed a movement 2 feet away. He spun, training his Auto 9 on the source of the movement. Clarence Bodicker. Bodicker smiled and, remarkably quickly for a human, pulled a grenade out of his flak jacket and yanked out the pin. Robo kept his gun pointed at Clarence's midsection. Clarence grinned, feeling he had the upper hand. "Call it Tinker Toy, or I turn this room into a meat locker." Robo stared at Bodicker. Clarence saw that there was no fear in the officer's eyes. For a split second, Bodicker felt that he was gazing at the meanest cop that had ever lived. He gaped at Robo and then at the muzzle of the Auto 9. Robo clenched his teeth and stepped closer. Clarence attempted a sneer. "I mean it, man. Back off." Robo smiled slightly. In one smooth action, he swung his free hand up, caught Clarence by the scrotum, and lifted him high into the air. Robo's hand continued its arc before letting go. Clarence soared wildly into the air, letting the hand grenade tumble loose. Bodicker crashed through a painted floor-to-ceiling supermarket window, sending countless shards of glass spinning in space. Another window blew in when the wild grenade landed and went off outside the rock lab. Robo twirled his gun, TJ laser style, and slipped it back into his holster. He marched across what remained of the rock house and crunched through the remains of the fractured window. he found Clarence, bleeding but not badly injured, lying in a garbage heap outside. Clarence stared at Robo. "Let me save us both a lot of time, Tin Man. Put me in jail and I'll be out in minutes. I'm in business with the guys at Omni—" "Hey!" Robo, not really wanting a prolonged conversation, lifted Clarence high in the air and aimed him at a window that was still intact. He calmly hurled the babbling killer through a second towering pane of glass. Clarence tumbled back into the rock house, landing between two tattered bodies that had once been part of Sal's ad hoc science squad. Clarence stared at the ceiling. A steady drip, drip, dripping of blood drooled across his forehead. Above him, the dead guard still swung gracefully by 1 foot. Robo appeared above Clarence. He leaned over him and whispered, "Clarence Boddicker, you're under arrest." He snapped handcuffs on the man's bleeding hands. "You have the right to remain silent. You have the right to an attorney." Clarence laughed in the big goof's face. "Listen, Chrome Dome, I know the guy you work for. We're buddies. I could make life easy for you. Save you the embarrassment." Clarence screamed as Robo yanked him off the floor and hoisted him to his feet by his handcuffs. "Anything you say can and will be held against you in the court of law." Robo glared at the killer. He squinted his eyes, locking into record mode. Clarence stared wide-eyed at the Titan. "Come on, man. I'm trying to do you a favor. I work for Dick Jones, the big poobah at OCP. You can call him. I have his card. Wise up, trash can. Jones is the number 2 guy at Omnicon." Robo seemed to look through the man. Over Clarence's face appeared the computer graphic. Voice stress analysis. 93% truth probability. Robo remained silent as he dragged Boddicker out of the lab and towards the awaiting turbo cruiser. His brain was working overtime. None of this was making sense. Yet. Clarence was yelling, all traces of composure gone, as Robo tossed him into the cruiser. "Don't you get it, asshole? Omnicon runs the cops. You're a cop." Robo sat behind the wheel. "Yeah, I'm a cop. A good cop." He gunned the gas and sent the turbo cruiser hurtling forward. "Damn," Clarence muttered. "You just opened one fucking El Grande can of worms, my metal man." Robo nodded. That was possible. But if he had, he'd find a way to slam that lid shut again.